broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Gail Strack. I'm the CEO of Alliance for Hope International. I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm told we have over 700 attendees, so that just warms my heart. As we're getting started, as many of you know, it's October, and October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And you can see our bright purple color. Many of you also know that purple represents the color for domestic violence, which represents hope and justice. So I am so looking forward to this particular webinar. I'm noticing that we're already having like cracks in our connection. So I want all of you to know we are aware of that. We don't know exactly what to do about it. So we're just gonna cross our fingers and hope that it doesn't lose the connection, and we'll just have a distraction every now and then. Maybe it's just a little angel wishing us a great webinar. So welcome again to Strangulation Survivors Speak Out. This is our October webinar. We're very excited to have an amazing group of people join us. But essentially, we're going to have a conversation. This particular slide is something that's important to us when it comes to Domestic Violence Awareness Month, is each and every one knowing about some of the statistics. Michael Burke and our team put this together, so I want to thank them for going to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, their website, CDC's website, and the information we have on our resource. But I think the statistics that really grab me the most is just how many victims are experiencing some form of physical abuse. And I guess what's just so alarming about that, those are the ones that we know. I think everyone knows that for every victim that comes forward, there are at least 10 victims or more that do not. So whatever we can do to bring awareness and attention and welcome survivors to our world, whether you're at a family justice center or a domestic violence or sexual assault program, I think October is about making that available, resources available, and welcoming survivors. The other one that's always quite shocking is that each and every day we have 3 women who die, and that is alarming. We have a lot more work to do. And I think the third one that I want to highlight is that once a victim is strangled, even one time, she's 750% more likely to be killed by her partner. But as we continue to talk and learn with Dr. Jackie Campbell and her team, that number we are figuring out is a low number. All you have to do is realize that victims are in extreme danger as they are in an abusive situation, as they continue to be strangled, and there are other issues as well. So what I want to do now is just keep on going and just say hello to our amazing hosts who are willing to join us today. That's me on the left, Gail Strack, and then right smack in the middle is Dr. Bill Smock. I just want to thank Bill for being part of our world and our lives. He is the chair of our medical advisory committee and has really assembled an amazing group of medical advisors who I just love and adore. He has the very unique name of a police surgeon, which I think is really cool. That means he's a cop and a doc at the same time. And he comes from Louisville Metro Police Department. We also have Michael Burke, who's on our team, and he was also the former Family Justice Center director in Shasta. He has dedicated much of his career to survivors, helping them. And I think all 3 of us are trying to seek hope and justice for all survivors. As we go to the next slide, I want to briefly introduce 3 amazing women who have been willing to share their story. And sharing your story is always, I think, difficult, but it's also very courageous. And as Casey always says, your pain can become your power. And I think today they are demonstrating tremendous amount of courage and sharing their power and their strength with all of you today. So today from San Diego, we have Michelle. Michelle serves as the chair of the Survivors Advisory Board at the San Diego Family Justice Center. And currently at the center, we have Mara Elliott, who is our elected city attorney, and Yvette Lopez Cooper, who's the director. They're working with our Local Voices chapter to bring everyone together. I'm also honored to introduce Joyce to you. She comes to us from the Voices group in Sacramento. And then last but not least, we have Sarah. And I just had a chance to see Sarah. And Sarah, thank you again for closing our one-day training in Buncombe, North Carolina. Your closing comments were very powerful, and I know all three of you have very important, powerful messages to share. So we'll continue with our day, and as we continue, it's always wonderful to say thank you. Thank you to our sponsors who help us make this webinar available to you, and in particular, we get to thank the Office on Violence Against Women. We have an acting director by the name of Katie Sullivan, who's an amazing woman, and we have a wonderful program manager, Kevin Sweeney. So thank you both for giving us this opportunity to share this particular topic with everyone. And we get this question a lot, so we're going to tell you about it twice. This webinar is being recorded. It will also be downloaded, it will be saved, and it will be uploaded to our resource library. So you will have access to this later on, and you can share it with your colleagues. And then, of course, our amazing Alliance for Hope team. As you know, we always like to share our love for them with all of you. In particular, we've got a couple of people who are doing some of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. First of all, Casey Gwinn was not able to join us, which he was very disappointed about because this is one of his favorite webinars of the year. I also want to thank, you can see Carly Gersberg. She's manning all the technology along with Patricia Middleton. So they're doing the heavy lifting. And then we have the expertise from Gloria Chalo, who is helping us today as well. And I think anybody who's gone to my training knows that I always start and end with Cassandra Tamara. As many of you know, they changed my life forever when I was in charge of the Child Abuse and Domestic Violence Unit for the San Diego City Attorney's Office. As Casey Gwinn was becoming our elected city attorney, he gave me the keys to our unit. And within a very short period of time, sadly, these two teenagers died, and I took it very personal and decided that I needed to learn more about them. And as we understand their history, is that Cassandra ultimately was stabbed to death in front of her girlfriends, and Tamara was strangled to death and then set on fire by her ex-boyfriend. Both of them were young mothers at the time. Both of them had a big future ahead of them, but both of them had been choked just before they were killed. And that was the indicator for us that there was something much more dangerous about strangulation that we didn't know. And then today we know that strangulation is one of the most lethal forms of domestic violence, and victims who are strangled are at high risk. So I just want to honor Cassandra and Tamara, and this is also our time to honor all victims of domestic violence who lost their lives. Today we are remembering you, we are honoring you, and will not let you die in vain. So what I want to do now is just go very briefly through power and control. As I learned about strangulation and realizing that it was more deadly than I ever expected, I came to the realization that I didn't realize how I was minimizing it. I think the lack of visible injuries caused me to minimize it, the lack of training, education, the lack of protocols, and certainly we didn't have any laws related to strangulation at that time. But power and control is at the heart of strangulation. It is about controlling your victim. And we do it through, or the batter does it through many different forms. If you take a look at the next slide, it's probably going to be a little bit easier to read because we're talking about intimidation, emotional abuse, using isolation, denying and blaming, using the children, privilege, entitlement, economic abuse, coercion, and threats. But if you look at the continuum of violence, I think that really puts it all into perspective. Before training, I put strangulation right after a slap because like a slap, there was only a red mark. But today we know that if you are strangled, you're 750% more likely to be killed. We now call strangulation the last warning shot because I think in many ways it's the batter's way of communicating not only to the victim but to everyone that he has the capability of killing his victim. It's like shooting a gun in the air. It's like shooting or stabbing someone and the victim survives, or shooting someone and the victim survives. It's a very clear message what this batterer is capable of doing. So we put strangulation right before a homicide, and we call it the last warning shot. Today in America, most victims die as a result of a firearm, but depending on which study you read, at least 50%, and in one study we found 100% of victims were strangled before they were killed. So what I would like to do now is to ask Michael to share a little bit more about Voices and why Voices is so important to our Family Justice Center work.
Thank you, Gail. The Voices Survivor Network is one of the most powerful programs we have at Alliance for Hope International. Very early on my journey in the Family Justice Center work, I listened to Casey and Gail talk about the importance of listening to survivors. As I went to the initial meetings about Family Justice Centers, I learned survivors were always at the table, and I met a survivor that really changed my life. And Tara came in the second day on my work and said, hey, let me help. And she helped me build the center from a very trauma-informed survivor focus. So the Survivor Network, in our guiding principles with Alliance for Hope International, we are very survivor-centered. And one of them is accountability to survivor is on our strategic directions. And we walk that talk. And the National Survivor Network helps us with our work. They look at what we do, they look at our policies and procedures and make sure that we are actually being accountable to survivors and listening to what survivors really need and want instead of sitting back and thinking we have all the answers. So we're very honored on this call to have some members of the National Survivor Network and a local survivor group, the Voices group in San Diego. And Michelle, Joyce, and Sarah have all touched my heart personally, and I know Gail's and Dr. Smock's also, as they really changed their communities for the better. They are the voice for the voiceless, and Voices are truly an advocacy group for others more than a support group. So we wanted to have our survivors introduce themselves today. They're going to carry us through the rest of the webinar, sharing their experiences, their bravery, and exactly what went on with them. So Michelle, would you like to do an introduction to our group so everybody can learn your voice and
Sure.
who you are?
Thank you. My name's Michelle. I'm a San Diego girl. I think the best way to describe myself is, since I was really young, I'm just like your typical friendly neighborhood girl next door. I'm a very, very proud mother. My background's in business, and that really used to be my passion. But now, with my experience having been a victim and now survivor of domestic violence, my passion has, in an odd way, become domestic violence. And now I spend almost all of my free time working with police department, attorneys' offices, a lot of schools and organizations, and not only speaking about my experience, but educating others about domestic violence, the evolution of it, red flags, and consequences associated with it. And I also do spend a good portion of my time talking about the victim law enforcement, victim prosecutor relationship, which not only I find extremely important, but has been probably one of the most rewarding outcomes to come out of my experience. So that's a little bit about me.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. And in Sacramento, Paul Durberg and Faith, who started the Sacramento Family Justice Center, actually started their Voices Committee a couple of years before even opening the door. And Joyce was the head of their Voices Committee, but now she also runs their client services there. She went from a Voices member to a staff member and is truly making a difference. So Joyce, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Joyce from Sacramento. I'm a military brat, so I grew up in the military household. I am the chair of our Voices group, which has been in existence. We're going on almost 5 years now before our Family Justice Center even opened, and I'm on the National Survivors Network and the director of our client services. I've been working in the field of domestic violence since '81 after I got out of my relationship, and it's just been something that I do. It's been a way of life, and can't imagine not doing this work because it's the right thing to do. So that's a bit of my story of who I am.
Thank you, Joyce. And I got to meet Sarah I talked to her for I think a year and a half before I actually met her in Buncombe, North Carolina. She came to our statewide conference on family justice centers. And Sarah's story is powerful, and I know we shed some tears together. So Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Michael. Yes, I'm Sarah from Asheville, North Carolina, and I normally start out by saying, you know, I'm from out west, college educated. I worked in advertising for years. My life is nothing like that now. I actually arrived in Asheville about 5 years ago after fleeing my abuser in the middle of the night. I came here with my pets and a backpack and started completely over from scratch with nothing. After seeking services from Helpmate, which is our nonprofit domestic violence agency, because the FJC was not opened yet, I really began wanting to give back in any way I could. So I share my story often. I do a lot of speaking, but I also, since creating the Family Justice Center, serve as the chair of our Voices Committee here, which is very active in continuing to bring a survivor voice to the community. And I serve on the Family Justice Center leadership team so that there is a survivor voice kind of at the forefront always. And that's a little bit about me.
I love that you share on the leadership team also, Sarah. Thank you, and thank you to all three of you. One of the things we advocate for with the Survivors Network is that voices are at the table. Voices are decision makers. Early on in my journey, I heard a Voices member stand up and say, "We are not mascots to the movement, we are equal partners in the movement." And you three have powerful stories, and we look forward to hearing more today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael, for making that point. And I think that is a very strong point to make as we continue to work with the Voices chapters across the United States, is that they need to be more than just mascots, and they need to be on-site partners and have a big presence. And I think it was Sacramento that actually started where the Voices members drafted their own welcome letter to each and every new client. And so I thought that was a nice way to welcome survivors to a family justice center. What we want to do now is talk to our survivors. We have a couple of questions for the attendees who are listening in. Let me just share how we plan to do this. We have 3 survivors and we have 3 questions. Each of them will answer one of those questions, and at the end they'll all have an opportunity to reflect or add anything additional to the conversation. So let's go ahead and start with Joyce. Joyce, can you tell us a little bit more about what happened when you were strangled?
Yes, I'll just give you a little background on that one in particular incident. I remember him beating me up one night, and he was using his fist, and he blackened both of my eyes, and he was kicking me all over my face and my body, breaking my jaw and several ribs. And I remember him knocking me down on the floor, and then he just straddled himself across the top of my stomach, and then he put both of his hands around my neck, squeezing my throat, while the entire time he was telling me that he was going to kill me. For me, in that moment, I was thinking very vividly about how was I ever going to get out of this one alive. In my mind, I was thinking that this was it, that I was going to die. Anytime I tried to stop him or display any kind of resistance, it would result in just more violence. I remember thinking that if I would fake like I was dying, he would stop, he would let up. So I actually pretended like each time I was strangled, but in this one night, I really actually pretended like I was dying, but in reality, I was becoming unconscious because I caught myself gasping for air and I could hardly breathe. And when I couldn't breathe and I was gasping for air, that's when he stopped. And despite all of the other severe abuse that I experienced by him and the fear that I had of him, I was still surprised and shocked that he strangled me. And when you showed the continuum where strangulation is between weapons, I remember that my incident or my cycle, I should say, ended where he took a machine gun, and I call it a machine gun. It was an automatic weapon, an M16, and he shot at me. He had 20 rounds and chased me down the street, and the third round went through my hair, and it jammed on that third round. But I remember I was being so grateful laying on the ground that night that I wouldn't be strangled anymore or abused by him. I always minimized being strangled because I didn't know that you could have injuries from it, and it didn't leave no marks. I was more focused on the injuries where it left bruises and broken bones, internal injuries. You know, as a result of that one incident, I had broken ribs and my jaw was wired shut from broken jaw, and both my eyes were swollen shut. And I remember vividly having some marks on my throat, but to me that was something that was just so minimal to me compared to all of the other. Now that I know different, I realize just how impactful strangling can be. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Joyce. I'm just picturing all of that and what you went through, and I'm so sorry that that happened. But I'm also really glad you are here to be able to tell that story, because I think you made a very good point, among other things, not only where strangulation is in the continuum of violence, but how you minimized it unintentionally because you didn't understand the significance of that. So would you say that's one of the biggest I would say lessons, but things that we should take away from this is not to minimize strangulation?
When we work with women here, that's the one thing, is not to minimize it, to take it very, very seriously, because I didn't know how serious it was. Even though my neck was hurting and I could hardly breathe and I was dizzy, I just contributed that to just my overall body just feeling bad from being beat up, you know, and that was just another piece of it. And I just totally minimized that. To me, since I didn't really see a lot of the damage around my neck, I did not even think about it, the damage it did to me internally, let alone what it was doing to me psychologically.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that point and making that point. So Sarah, let's talk about what happened in your experience. What do you remember about that, or what is something that you'll never forget?
Well, you know, thank you, Gail. I actually was strangled quite often in my relationship, and also minimized it, kind of normalized it. Although I have to say, in addition to severe abuse, being strangled was the most terrifying thing, that I really would try to do anything to stay outside of arm's reach. But one particular incident I remember being in the middle of a horrible fight. It had been ongoing for quite a while, and he managed to spin me around and grab my throat, and his hands were huge. I was 5'2" and 120 pounds, and he was 6'5" and 250, and they were able to, his hands were able to wrap clear around me, and he lifted me up and pinned me against a wall. And I remember my feet dangling beneath me, and at first really trying to wave my arms at him to try and push him off of me. But it was so hard for me to do, to just keep up that movement. I couldn't breathe. My face was really hot. I remember my eyes felt like they were bugging out of my head. And so I was trying to pull his hands off of me, but he was so strong, and I couldn't. He was yelling that he was going to kill me, that today was my day to die, and he was so close. I remember the spit hitting my face when he was yelling, and it became really hard to listen to what he was saying. I just kept thinking, I'm going to die, that this is the end. And I remember thinking about my poor dog alone without me, and just how terribly sorry I was, that I wasn't going to make it out alive. I began to see spots and lights, and then everything kind of dimmed and was really fuzzy. And then I felt my back hitting the edge of a stair, and he had let me go and pushed me and was yelling at me, and I he was still talking. I just started running and running, but I couldn't catch my breath and I couldn't scream. It was absolutely terrifying. I don't think there was anything as scarier as that moment, and it was a miracle that I was given that second to flee. And I 3 people had called the neighbors had called 911. I had gotten to a neighbor's house when the police arrived, who did not treat it seriously, and even commented about the handprint on my throat. Yeah, it was a terrifying experience.
Sarah, thank you for sharing that. You just described a near-death experience, and what I even heard you say, you were almost describing the 4 stages that we talk about sometimes in our training, the 4 stages of death and what you experience. And I think that is a key point for the professionals that are listening in as we interview victims who have suffered strangulation or some assault, is to document that experience, what they went through and what they were feeling. And the way you've described it, that's what we need to bring to everyone's attention so people can understand that experience and that will take strangulation seriously and realize what is happening. So I just want to thank you for sharing that. I also heard something that comes up a lot with signs and symptoms that Dr. Bill Smock is going to be talking about. You mentioned that it was difficult hearing him, and many victims have described when they've been strangled an impairment not only to their vision, which you talked about as well, but also the changes in hearing. But hopefully Bill will talk a little bit more about that and explain some of those symptoms that you described. What I want to do now is go to Michelle and ask Michelle about her experience and if the police were contacted and what happened in your case.
Well, I did contact the police. I mean, it took, the better part of 17 years to contact them. And like any legal process, my experience was just filled with peaks and valleys. I had a difficult time going to the police initially because I didn't know anything about the system, and what you see in media can be really discouraging. Well, the police don't do anything and they don't care, and murderers are walking the street, rapists are walking the street. And when you start thinking like that, you think, well, if they're walking the street, what are they actually going to do with an abuser or someone who beats a woman? My initial police interaction occurred after I had taken a restraining order out to protect myself and my son from him. And, an hour into getting that restraining order, he violates it by coming to my home. And I called the police, and that police officer who responded would be one of the peaks in my experience. He was very, very calm, extremely efficient, but he was also very human. He, reassured me that what I was going through was not okay, that he understood my distress, and he really presented an environment for me where my mind started to say, okay, maybe they will help me. Maybe there is help out there in terms of the police being involved. And I just want to go back really quick. I said he was my first interaction, and in many ways he was, but right before that, when I took the restraining order out, I was advised to take it down to the sheriff's office, and that, a sheriff's deputy would take the restraining order and they would try to issue it within the next 3 weeks. And it was a female sheriff's deputy. And I was really distressed by the time that this was happening. When I walked away, when I left, I didn't walk away, calmly on my 2 feet. I was extremely, extremely distressed and scared. And I remember being in the sheriff's office and her coming out from behind the desk, and I handed her the paperwork and I said, will you try to serve it today? Will you get out there today? And she's like, no, of course not. And I said, well, when are you going to give it to him? And she kind of looked at me and she said, well, you need to calm down, first of all. And she kind of flipped through the paperwork and she said, 17 years, huh? But now all of a sudden you're scared. And I just remember like my heart sinking and I thought, oh my God, if this is what it's going to be like, I don't even know if I want to do this. I don't even know if I want this given to him. So she was really the first interaction I had with law enforcement. Then I had the responding police officer to the violation of the restraining order. He, of course, was, a little beacon of hope. He was a peak in the experience. And then when I met my detective, it was a little bit of a roadblock. Detectives, police officers, they see a lot, and their minds aren't always, fresh and willing to hear the next story. They're kind of like, what is this about? And he was really one of those. He was a little bit of a valley. And I remember feeling very discouraged because I thought, he's already made up his mind. He doesn't care. He doesn't believe me. He already thinks it's my fault. But I had a lot of fight in me at the time, and I was very persistent. And for every time he told me, don't call me, I'll call you, I'll reach out if I need something, I would follow up with a phone call. What are you doing? What's going to happen now? I want to come in and talk to you. And to his credit, once I was able to really speak to him on a personal level, and I mean personal when I'm not talking to him about technical parts of what he's looking at, I started to talk to him about it, being human. And I would tell him, I'm scared, I'm distressed, I feel like you don't want to help me, I feel like you've made up your mind. Once I got on that level with him and I think he saw my distress, he really opened up. And I always say he was, very dual-sided to me. He was a peak and valley, because when I first met him, I thought, this is terrible. This is not going to go anywhere. And once he opened up to me and started to listen, and he really started to look at me as a victim, it changed everything. And he started to collect evidence and talk to me and explain the process to me. And he was really fantastic. And I credit him greatly with, what he did for my approach and how I saw my case, and for what he did for the case technically. And I went up to the district attorney's office. They looked at it, they felt it was serious, and they prosecuted him. They brought charges down on him. And it, like any legal process, there's continuances and all these lapses of time. But at the end of the day, it went to trial. And he was convicted, and he is now in prison and will be there for a number of years. So I would say that my experience with the police, with the district attorney's office, was successful. It was satisfying to me in terms of justice, and it was a good experience, but it was also a real experience. It was a very good outcome that had hundreds of highs and lows in between. But at the end of the day, I got what I felt I needed in terms of justice, and I'm grateful that I did eventually go to the police. And if I had to do it again, knowing all those highs and lows, I would do it all over again the same way. I wouldn't change a thing.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for sharing that. And there's so many important pieces of what you just shared. What I got out of it is that justice was served. And it sounds along the way, you called it peace. Certain individuals gave you hope. Can you say a little bit more about the importance for people to give victims hope when they are ready to come forward and they need our help?
Yeah, I think that for me, the number one thing that happened in my head was that I had already decided that there was so much against me. My abuser was against me. His friends, his family, his new girlfriend, anyone who believed him. So here I had this army of people already against me on his side. And the last thing I think I could bear, which is why I was so transparent with the detectives and the police officer and the prosecutors, was I could not bear to have more people against me. And you have so much, right? The system's in a way against you because abusers can easily turn around, um, accuse you of things. I had a little boy I had to think about, and he would always say to me, well, if you call the police, I'm going to go to CPS and tell them that you're not a good mom and they're going to take him away. So you already feel the system's against you, the people are against you. You feel like you're in a hole and you have to dig yourself out of it. It's a really, really deep hole. It's nothing that a good day and a positive outlook will get you out of. It takes a lot to get yourself out of where you are when you're coming out of a situation with domestic violence. And I think consciously and subconsciously, I kept looking for something to tell me that this was going to be worth the fight. My fear was I get a restraining order, I go to the police, the family's broken up, I have my side, he has his side, and at the end of all that, nothing's going to happen. That was my greatest fear. Why would I make all this noise? Why would I start this if at the end of the day it's going to end at zero? So I think I was constantly looking for something to tell me, yeah, do it. Get out there, fight the fight. Tell them what happened. Look for justice. And anybody, I think, in the legal world, law enforcement, and those of us who have been victimized know is there is absolutely no greater hunger than the hunger for justice. It's consuming in itself. And I was just looking, give me a sign. And those signs started to pop up in really subtle ways. The officer, I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name or not, but the officer who responded, just by being calm and listening to me and being empathetic in the way that he didn't make me feel that he felt sorry for me. He made me feel that what I had to say was important to him and that what had happened to me was not okay. And by taking my report, talking to me, and making me feel as though, hey, this is something that is going to go to someone. What he did is not okay. That was a little bit of hope right there. And I started to feel that if he is a police officer, he's an example of the system. He's representing the system. And he, as a representative, is telling me that what has happened to you is not okay. So all of a sudden, he became this little beacon of hope. And that little crawl I had going toward, my justice became a little bit of a walk. And when I got to my detective, he was a little bit of a stonewall. But once he kind of opened up to me, he was another little bit of hope. So now I've passed the responding police officer. Now I'm at the detective. And he's showing me that he cares. And he's showing me that my words have some weight and that what happened to me is not okay. And then I got to the DA, and the DA said to me on the phone, he said, as a victim, I'm trying to rush everything. What's going to happen? When are we going to court? What are you going to do? Don't ignore my case. I'm important too. And he said to me, hey, I want you to know what I think happened to you is egregious, and we're not okay with what we've read. Oh, another bit of hope. So you're really not looking for someone to come in and say, hey, I'm going to save you. Everything's going to be okay, because that's just not going to happen. But each individual opening up, listening, letting you tell your story, understanding where you're coming from, letting you be emotional. I was always crying, and I was always very transparent. I told the DA, I'm afraid I'm case 100 on your desk and it's not important to you because there's worse cases, but it means everything to me. And them just, listening to me, explaining the process to me, showing me they care became, like I keep saying, these little beacons of hope. And by the time I went to court, I was ready. I was full of hope and full of fight, because the very people who are in charge of helping me achieve or get that justice that I want are showing me support and showing me care. And they weren't against me, so I stopped worrying about the people who were, and it changed the course of how I viewed my case and my situation.
Wow, thank you, Michelle. I think you make such a really, really important point. And maybe after this webinar, you can tell me who that amazing police officer was, who was calm and human and made you feel that you were important. And the other message I get from all of this is, yes, we're all busy. We have more calls than we can take from 911 or cases sitting on our desk. But each one of those cases represents a human being that really needs us to give them hope. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to open it up to our other speakers. Joyce or Sarah, if you want to add anything to this particular conversation.
This is Joyce. I'd just like to add that I totally agree. I just think if our law enforcement or healthcare providers or first responders and victim advocates, whomever, probation, all just offered just a little bit of hope, it would make the biggest difference in the world, because throughout my 10 years, I had no hope until one person came into my life, a victim advocate, and told me that this was not my fault. And it just changed my whole world when I began to believe that maybe it wasn't my fault. It was because one person said, you know, I'm concerned about your safety. Let's look at some other things here, and let's see what we can do to make you safe, that you don't deserve this, and you're not crazy, and you're not alone. So hope is what I just love about the Family Justice Centers, because it is a place of hope.
Thank you. I think you're absolutely right. Sarah?
Oh, and I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with everything I heard. I think the one thing about my story was that there was no hope, and my interaction was mostly with law enforcement, and it was I was either generally ignored, or my experiences were pretty negative in that I was never given option or told that there was a way out, and that's part of it. That's what I want to share with every survivor going through that, is that there is hope.
Thank you. I think we're coming up with a really good theme, which was how we started, being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and the color purple, which represents hope and justice. And I think this conversation just did exactly that. One person can make a difference, and each person is a step of hope, which ultimately leads to justice. So what I want to do now is ask Michael Burke to jump back in, and Michael Burke will ask a few questions, and we'll continue this amazing conversation.
Amazing conversation it is. Thank you all so much for your bravery and for your realness, and your transparency is inspiring. So I have a question for Joyce. A lot of times people ask, what did you do? And the real question should be, why did he strangle, not what did you do to deserve it? And we are getting there slowly. And I think as advocates, as law enforcement, we really need to listen to our survivors and listen to what people are saying, as you heard Michelle say. So Joyce, why do you think he strangled you?
I think this was an interesting question because it has never been asked to me. So I was really thinking about this the last few days. And if you would have asked me this question years ago, I would have made it about me, that there was something wrong with me. And I used to think it was because he was out of control. But looking back now, I think it was because he lost control of the situation, and he was trying to gain control of the situation again. He chose to control me by choking me. And when he did, I believe that he wanted to show me, because he would say it, that he had the power to kill me if he wanted to. He would put his hands around my neck, and he would always say, I could kill you if I wanted to, while he was doing that. And most importantly, I think he strangled me because he could get away with it. He was never held accountable. He was never held accountable for shooting at me with a machine gun. You know, he was just never held accountable for any of his actions. And eventually he died, and I guess he became accountable then. But I think it was because he wanted to show me that he did have the power, that he could kill me with his bare hands.
Casey calls that the God complex, and Casey will often say a man who hits a woman is stupid, but a man who strangles a woman is a killer. And I'm glad you made it out, Joyce. And that's a question as advocates we need to be asking, because in this work we know that when a woman takes control of her situation, the most dangerous time is that 2-week window after she says, I'm in control now. And that's when the abuser has to try to take back control one way, shape, or form. So thank you so much. We wanted to go on and ask Sarah, what do victims need to know about strangulation?
Well, I actually think what Joyce said and your comments as well is incredibly important to know. I also would have made that about myself, and really realizing that it was showing that he had total control over whether I lived or died. I think everyone needs to know that. And specifically with victims, truly how dangerous strangulation is, that you can die within seconds, as well as all of the things, all of the consequences that go along with strangulation that are not just physical damage, TBI, difficult concentration, memory, the ability to make decisions, also the behavior of the potential to be combative or appear uncooperative directly after that. I think it's so important to realize how dangerous that is and what it says about your abuser, that they are predators, and that they're dangerous to you, they're dangerous to your family, they're dangerous to the community at large, as well as law enforcement, and really that safety needs to be a priority.
Sarah, you've talked about how normalized strangulation is and how it wasn't treated very seriously in your case. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It was never asked whether or not I had been strangled. Sometimes there were visible handprints, sometimes not. It was never taken seriously. I was never given medical attention, even though I had interaction with law enforcement. So it seemed very much like it fell into it's the equivalent of a slap. I also had an existing TBI beforehand. So the damage that was being done to me was probably significant, but never looked at. And I often acted, I struggled being cooperative. I struggled remembering what had happened. I wasn't very clear in my communication. And then I was dismissed as either, being unstable or wanting the situation that I was in, or being unwilling to change. So I really just wrote that off, that there was nothing worth helping with me. And really it wasn't until I started, doing the work that I do with the Family Justice Center that I really was able to see how really deadly that is, and that it doesn't get better once an abuser strangles.
Thank you so much. I've heard a lot of survivors talk about how sharing their story became power, and they got the power back in telling their story and helping others. So thank you so much. Michelle, you talked a little bit of advice that you gave when dealing with law enforcement, but what's one piece of advice you would give to an advocate or an officer or prosecutor when interacting with a survivor of strangulation?
One thing I would like to say before I go into that, I just want to qualify the statement I'm going to make. And what I'm saying right now is taking into consideration that all of those people, our first responders, our prosecutors, our advocates, they're overwhelmed, they're short on time, they're working with not a lot of resources. They're weighed down with cases. Some might be, tainted by previous experiences. So I'm not saying this with the idea that they have, endless time on their hands or anything like that. But I think what I would tell them is that to give every story a chance before they've made up their mind about it, or before they've decided to write it off, or before they start thinking, well, this must have to do with custody, and this must have to do with a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Intimate relationships are complicated. Domestic violence instances are complicated. And why things happen can be trivial. And the reasons why you stay are also complicated. The number one question I got was, how and why did you stay for 17 years? And that was easy for me to answer because I had thousands of reasons. Because I had a little boy, because we had already been together for a long time, because I didn't want shame. I mean, the list went on and on. If you want reasons as to why something happens, I can give it to you. But I would like for law enforcement and prosecutors and advocates to, and especially, law enforcement and prosecutors, that ultimately you'll have a chance to sit back and look at the story. You'll have evidence. There'll be an opportunity to do an investigation. So until you get there, don't make up your mind about whether it's true or not, whether it was due to A or B. Give the story a chance and really give the person a chance, because I'm a very vocal, resourceful, driven person. I'm the squeaky wheel, and when I want oil, I'm going to squeak all day. And if the experience was so difficult for me, having the personality I have, I can't imagine what it's like for someone who is unlike me. So my biggest piece of advice would be give the person and the story a chance, then make up your mind.
Thank you so much. Words of wisdom, Michelle. That's absolutely wonderful. The reasons people stay are complicated. That's what you said, and I've heard that over and over. It's not as simple as you should just leave. There's lots of reasons people stay there, and to be able to listen to survivors is one of the most important things we can do in this work. So I know we're going to move on to Dr. Smock. Thank you all, ladies, for sharing. You'll have more opportunities to share in just a little bit, but Dr. Smock's going to talk about some medical implications now.
Good morning, good afternoon, ladies. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. And the stories that you are sharing, I have heard, Michael and Gail have heard all over the world, that what you are experiencing is not unique, and that the other individuals, the other women that are experiencing this need to know that they are not alone and there are resources available to them. Coming to the medical consequences, what we want to talk about, because we get a lot of questions at the Institute, what do we do about certain medical conditions? And what advice do we have to women who have been strangled? How can we get them help? So let's start off with Joyce. What consequences have you experienced, if any, as a result of your assault, abuse, and strangulation?
Yes, thank you. I have, as a result of being strangled, I take thyroid medicine because I've had trouble with my thyroid due to strangulation. So I've been taking that for, I need to take it the rest of my life. And I also suffer from post-traumatic stress. I don't have it as much as I did, but I still suffer from it. In particular, if anything is around my neck or something's too tight, or I just feel like I'm in a tight quarters. That's more of the psychological end of it. I've had difficulty throughout my life since then, throughout trying to concentrate. Sometimes when I'm doing a big project, I have to really just pay real close attention to really try and focus and to concentrate on the task at hand. I get it done, but it always seems like has been more of a challenge for me than most people as a result of that.
And what you reported about problems with your thyroid, we are finding cases all over the country of women that are experiencing thyroid issues after being strangled. When I look at the medical literature, there are cases of what's called thyroid storm, which are life-threatening symptoms associated with the release of excess thyroid hormone, high blood pressure, high heart rate, even precipitating heart attacks and heart damage. Because in the thyroid gland, which is right there surrounding your windpipe, your trachea, if that is squeezed, particularly during an operation, we know that it can cause the anesthesiologist headaches because they are now having to control your high blood pressure, your high heart rate. So we know that happens, although we don't know exactly what the mechanism is for women who are having long-term thyroid issues, but we know it is real.
I do have
Sarah.
to add that. Oh, I was going to say, I do have to add that I also have high blood pressure as a result. I've been on high blood pressure medication the same time I was put on thyroid medication.
Interesting. Sarah, were you frustrated when you entered the medical system? And principally, because we know this is kind of an uphill battle, how do we educate? Or were your paramedics and physicians informed about the potential consequences of strangulation?
I don't believe that they were at all. Quite honestly, I had no medical attention between 2011 and 2014, even though I interacted with police close to 18 times during that time. I was never taken to be checked out or examined, and I had no health insurance. When I did finally, when I was finally able to get back in the medical system, it was not something that I actually thought of mentioning right away. It seemed kind of like a small thing in comparison, but through continued medical care, that it has come up several times. And while I haven't had any MRIs or CAT scans, it significantly exacerbated a TBI that I already had, which really included a lot of issues with migraines, cognitive function. Memory is very, very difficult for me, as well as balance and coordination. And I also have serious chronic neck damage, as well as nerve pain. I'm actually in my second year of doing physical therapy. My range of motion for my neck is only 20% of what it should be for a person my age. And I also struggle with PTSD and night terrors. I'm under the care of a neurologist as well as a therapist and psychiatrist. So it has had significant impacts. I think because it had been so long before I actually was able to get medical attention, it again was kind of downplayed, even though I think the medical community is better informed than certainly they were 7 or 8 years ago. But I think coming from that perspective of all domestic violence victims, with the assumption that they have been strangled until it's proven otherwise, I think really doing routine screening for it and follow up is just so vital and important.
I'm so glad you're being followed by a neurologist, because what we see across the country are women with memory issues. And from the physiologic perspective, the part of the brain that is the most sensitive to the lack of oxygen, we call that anoxia, is the hippocampus, and that is the part of the brain that helps us create memory. And if that is the part of the brain that dies first when we block blood flow to the brain, that's why we have reports of memory issues. So, but I'm glad you have a neurologist that may be at least informed about traumatic brain injuries, because we're also seeing traumatic brain injuries in victims who are strangled, because during the assault, their head may be going back and forth, hitting the wall or hitting the floor, which is causing a shearing of the axons within the brain that would not be visible microscopic, or would be visible microscopically, but will not be seen on CAT scan or MRI. The other thing that I recommend is that if there is evidence of cognitive challenges, obtaining neuropsychological testing, because that can help the neurologist actually figure out what part of the brain is working well and what part may not be working so well. So neuropsych testing is something you may want to ask your neurologist about. And Michelle, were the physicians that saw you knowledgeable, or how would you rate them?
I was very lucky. I felt they were, and also they were working with what I told them. So I was too afraid at the time to go into the emergency room and say, this is what happened to me. But I needed medical attention. So I had changed the story a little bit. I said that it was due to something else, that I had gone out and a fight had broken out and this person had accidentally grabbed me by the neck. So they were working with what they had. But their concern as far as the pain I was in was very immediate. The response was good. And, for me, the doctors did their best. I mean, they're all using, the doctor was using medical definitions, and he's very technical, But he was explaining to me why he wanted to, do an MRI scan, and why it was important that I not just leave and go home. So in my experience, I thought that the response and knowledge was very good.
That's good, because we are struggling with educating, particularly emergency physicians across the country, of the seriousness and the potential life-threatening consequences of what happens to a neck and the structures in the neck when pressure is applied, particularly with hands, ligature, or with arms around the neck. So thank you very much, Michelle, for sharing that. And there are other, if you are having trouble with your voice, and again, this is another common complaint, please make sure you go see an ear, nose, and throat physician who can actually look at the throat, see if the vocal cords are operating normally, or is there swelling or blood collection back there, a hematoma, collection of blood under the skin that is causing problems with either swallowing or with your voice. As we go through some of the other potential consequences, in the neck, we know that even though you've all said that you were choked, choking is physiologically when you get a foreign body stuck in the back of your throat. And strangulation is when we have the application of external pressure applied to the neck. But we're going to put, from an investigative standpoint, we're going to put that in quotes. Some of the vital structures in the neck, obviously the carotid and vertebral arteries, this takes the oxygenated blood to the brain. And without oxygenated blood, you will go unconscious and brain cells will die. We have the trachea, the windpipe, with cartilaginous structures. The thyroid cartilage, which is our voice box. We have cricoid cartilage, which is just below that, and then we have tracheal rings. And any human that can squeeze someone's hand has the pressure to block or crush all of those structures in the neck. I think the most life-threatening and potential time bomb in your neck is the unrecognized injury to either the carotid or the vertebral artery. And you can look perfectly normal and have an intimal tear or a flap inside that artery that can create a blood clot, and then that clot can break off and then go north to the brain, and that is causing a stroke. And so we have created the protocol to address that and to educate emergency physicians or family physicians of what to do when someone who has been strangled presents to the emergency department. And I think we have a copy of that on our next slide that will actually it's going to be the one after this. But the signs and symptoms can be anything from no visible injuries, and we know that you can be fatally strangled with no marks on your neck. So if someone doesn't recognize that and doesn't understand that you can die, be dead with no marks on your neck, then they really don't understand what is happening when pressure is applied to the neck. So that's one of the struggles that we deal with police officers, with physicians, and sometimes with prosecutors, that they don't understand that you can die and have no marks externally on the neck, or even no petechial hemorrhage, the rupture of those capillaries. So the ticking time bomb, and the one thing that I think we really need to push as far as medical education, is addressing the radiologic evaluation of our victims' necks, so that when they present to the emergency department, what tests need to be ordered to assure the patient and the physician that that patient is safe to be discharged. And so I think as we go to that protocol, I think it may be a slide or two up. If we can go forward to that slide, and we'll come back to it. This is the radiologic protocol that can be downloaded from the Institute that will give those physicians guidance about what test needs to be ordered. And you were talking about how the police officers gave you hope. I have to give a shout out to two officers from the Tucson Police Department who attended our training just 2 weeks ago, Sergeant Brian Knight and Detective Bill Leonard, who had a victim who was strangled multiple times and was rendered unconscious multiple times, and took that patient to a level 1 trauma center in Tucson, Arizona, where the physicians refused to do the appropriate test, the CTA. And thanks to these two detectives going the extra mile, they called me. We were able to take that victim who'd been strangled unconscious, again, 3 times, to another hospital and where the appropriate test was done and where the physicians understood the risks and the potential consequences to that victim. So Sergeant Knight and Detective Leonard from Tucson PD, way to go. You went the extra mile for that victim. You showed her how important she was. Another question that comes up, and if we can go back to our slide for the paramedics, part of the education is to help our pre-hospital providers determine and understand, again, the consequences and who needs to be transported and who doesn't, and how do we inform our patient on the scene. So if you are...
Excuse me, let's go perfect to the strangulation assessment card. Thank you.
Great. So this card is also available for download. This is something originally designed for our pre-hospital providers, EMTs and paramedics, but we're now finding that it's even being used by police officers, used by advocates in facilities and family justice centers, so we can educate and talk to our victims. When is it necessary to transport? Well, if you have pressure applied to your neck, difficulty breathing, you went unconscious, you urinated, you defecated, and also to inform them that there are potentially deadly consequences. You can look perfectly normal, have no symptoms, but have that ticking time bomb of the carotid artery dissection in your neck, and until that clot breaks off, you will look perfectly normal until you stroke, and then it is too late. Again, download this, available. We can put your own logo on there. And what's on the back of this card is some very important information. 1, to inform the patient, but 2, to give to the medical provider, to give them some assistance. If you go into emergency room and the physician does not understand the consequences, they can actually go to the website and download that protocol, and that will help them in their evaluation. And then I think the follow-up questions that we had of when is it, how long after the strangulation incident would you need to worry about a carotid artery dissection? Looking at the literature, clearly you can have a stroke from a dissection up to a year out, and that's probably getting 98% of all potential strokes. I did have a nurse who was strangled, who I had recently met, who was strangled 2 years prior to her stroke when the clot broke off. But again, I think probably a year out, if you've been strangled, rendered unconscious, the recommendation would be to get that CTA if you're within that year period, and I think you're 98% safe of not having that stroke. So after you've heard me talk about some of the potential consequences, Sarah, Michelle, or Joyce, do you have any other medical questions that you'd like to ask?
I do not.
I just have one. This is Joyce. How does this, in California, and I'm not sure which other states, might be all, we have a mandated reporting law for healthcare providers to screen and report. And have you came across, I don't know, this is kind of a broad question. I know for myself, one of the reasons I didn't seek medical care because of that law too. I was afraid to have it reported.
Right.
Just
well, I think what's most important is to take care of the victim. And each state is different regarding mandatory reporting. You may be afraid to report, but are you more afraid of stroking and then worrying about who is going to take care of your children? If you are now paralyzed, half your body can't move, does that mean the care of your children will now fall to the person who inflicted these injuries and caused you to have a permanent and life-threatening and life-debilitating injury? Those are things to think about. Another question that does come up is who is going to pay for the test? And what we found out is that some insurance will pay for it. Crime Victims Compensation will pay for it. Some hospitals have actually even waived the fee for this test because they understand the importance of screening these patients with potentially life-threatening injuries.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for talking about this medical piece, which is critical. I think Dr. Bill Smock said it. We are very afraid and concerned for victim safety immediately after being strangled and the long-term consequences. So as we start to wrap up this particular webinar, I want to just highlight some things for the advocates and all of us about how we can advocate for victim safety and victims' health. So as we go to the next slide, I just want to highlight Dr. Jackie Campbell. Thankfully, she has been doing this work and has had this focus as well with the original assessment tool with 20 questions. I'm hoping everyone is aware of that. And we just wanted to highlight one more tool. She just created the Danger Assessment 5, which is really geared towards the medical professional. So for all of the medical professionals who are on this call, I hope you will take a look at Danger Assessment number 5. There's a great article that is attached to it, and she really focuses on 5 important questions, which all of the survivors mention at one point or another, about how the physical violence has increased, a weapon was used against them, or there was a threat of a weapon. Sounded like each and every one believed that he was capable of killing them. Strangulation was involved in each and every case. And it appears that there was also some jealousy, as when I think it was Joyce who said he lost control and he was trying to regain that control. But as we go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight an app. This app, you can find it in your app store, called My Plan. And interestingly enough, it was in partnership with One Love Foundation and Dr. Jackie Campbell in honor and in memory of Yeardley Love, who was strangled and then killed by her boyfriend. So I think everyone needs to take a look at this. It's a tool that I think victims can use in the privacy of their own thoughts, especially if they're concerned about their safety and their relationship. And as everyone has mentioned, we know that it's difficult to come forward, and when a victim does, we need to be there. So let's take a look at the next slide, because what we want to highlight is the victim brochure, which our team has come up with. And if you go to the next one, it's an opportunity for victims to log their signs and their symptoms, to pay very close attention what could happen within the next 12, 24, 36 hours. And if things start getting worse, to reach out for medical care. I think Dr. Smock mentioned it very carefully and very correctly about, yes, it is scary to report because you don't know what's going to happen, but the consequences outweigh those challenges. What I wanted to share with everyone today is that we are still offering to make our brochure, the victim brochure, available to you, and we will customize it with your logo and your contact information. Just reach out to us afterwards, or you can immediately go ahead and send us a high definition logo to TISP@allianceforhope.com, and we can start working on that for you, your high definition logo and your contact information. The other piece I wanted to share as far as advocating for victims, especially in the medical community, we talked today about traumatic brain injury, and I think this is the silent killer. We're not doing a very good job across the United States screening, assessing, or treating victims. There are 2 tools that we know of. One is called HELPS, which is an easy way to assess somebody who has a concussion. The next tool that I wanted to share with you is what our medical committee is working on right now. Most of these tools are really focused on, and if we can go to the next slide, on concussion. So our medical team is now reviewing it to incorporate an anoxic brain injury. But what I love about this form versus the HELPS form is that there's a spot for follow-up treatment and contacting a specialist. And I think whatever form we use, making that referral for a specialist and further testing is going to be very important. Let's go to the next slide. And now I want to encourage people to go ahead and type in your questions. We have about 15 minutes left. I already have received some of those questions, so I'm going to go ahead and take the very first one. I think one of the questions that came up is about men who experience sexual assault, physical assault, verbal, emotional, and financial abuse. And absolutely, I think everyone agrees with me that we know men are victims of domestic violence, and there's a lot of resources for men who are experiencing that. I'm sorry that this particular webinar didn't have that particular focus, but we can certainly do that in the future. I will say, as far as sharing our statistics about a gender crime, we have found out that when it comes to strangulation, men are the ones who are strangling women. In our study back in 1995, yes, the late 1900s, I like to tease, and the article that was published in the Journal of Emergency Medicine, we found out that 99% of the time, men were strangling women, and this was a study of 300 cases. So that is an important piece. We also know women can strangle men, but it's rare. I think in my experience, I have seen more women strangle their children than an adult male. Let me go to the next question. And I think, this one's going to be for Dr. Bill Smock. Is there any evidence of damage to an unborn child if mom is strangled while pregnant?
The damage to the brain, and that's going to be the most sensitive part of an unborn child, is a consequence of the duration the mom goes without oxygen. When you strangle the mom, you are depriving the mom's brain of oxygen. And so her oxygen levels are going to be decreasing the longer she goes without being able to breathe. But the unborn child is still having blood pumped to them. So their oxygen levels will not be decreasing as fast. So the consequence to the brain of the unborn child is really a function of how low does mom's oxygen level get. The other thing that will happen to the unborn is there evidence of trauma to the abdomen that results in the miscarriage. And because miscarriage is a normal complication of a normal pregnancy, luckily a small percentage, that comes up as a potential defense. How do we know that the assault was a consequence of the strangulation, or was this just a miscarriage that was going to happen anyway? And I think the way to get around that is there evidence of trauma? But since we have no controlled studies, we do have anecdotal cases of brain damaged fetuses when the mom is deprived of oxygen. So really, it's how long does the mom go without oxygen will dictate, is there any damage, and if yes, how severe?
So, Dr. Smock, can you share a little bit more about the new pregnancy protocol?
Yes. Our medical team, and this was headed by Dr. Mike Weaver, has published a protocol of how we evaluate the arteries in the neck and the structures of the neck in pregnant women that are strangled. This too is available from the website and can be downloaded for your hospital or for your center. And this is the recommendations that are endorsed by all the physicians on the medical subcommittee. It follows the American College of OB/GYN, their recommendations, and it is a great tool for usually the emergency physician or the family physician who has a patient who is pregnant and who's also been strangled.
Thank you. I'm going to skim some of these questions, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out another medical one. There was a question about what I'm going to call positional asphyxia, like when someone is strangled, like with a bear hug, or somebody sits on someone's chest. What is the impact to the brain?
If it's positional asphyxia and the blood is still flowing to the brain, that is what we call a hypoxic insult versus an anoxic insult. And the difference is, if you block blood flow to the brain, you have no oxygen, that is the anoxia, versus hypoxia, which means I can't breathe. So I'm still having blood pumped to the brain, but the oxygen levels are going down, down, down until I can breathe again. So the damage to the brain will occur much more slowly in an hypoxic event or positional asphyxia event. You can die from both. You will die from the anoxic insult sooner than you will from the hypoxic, and brain damage will begin sooner in the hypoxic situation or in the anoxic situation as compared to the hypoxic or positional asphyxia assault.
Thank you. Well, we're getting a lot of questions now, so I'm going to go ahead and start answering a couple of more. There was a question about learning more about the long-term consequence of strangulation. So where you can find more information is if you go to our resource library, there is a domestic violence report. We have a short article written by a group of us about the long-term consequences of strangulation. We also have a webinar that Dr. Bill Smock did for us talking about the top 25 long-term consequences. You can watch the webinar, and you can also download his PowerPoint, which I think gives you a lot of great information there. The other question that we had is, sounds like people love our danger assessment card, which thank you very much. And there's a request that if we can make it another gender or non-binary, so we can take a look at that. We haven't gotten there yet. What we're doing right now is still creating many of our tools. We're trying to translate them into Spanish and other languages. We will definitely do that, and thank you for that request. There was a question about the app related to the risk assessment tool, and I want to highlight that it's called My Plan. I just looked it up again, just make sure it was still on there. So if you go to my app store, type in My Plan, that'll be the first thing that pops up, at least it did for me. So I think that is something that we all should have. I usually have my law students, when I teach about domestic violence, to actually have that available, because once they know they're taking that class, there's always a friend or someone who wants to know more. The other one I wanted to bring out would be, how do you help a victim who does not see that her life is at risk and she continues to stay with him? And I'm going to open that one up to our survivors, Joyce, Sarah, or Michelle. How would you like to, what would be your advice to another survivor?
This is Michelle. Because of my experience, and also I'm 42 years old, so I see life now, having lived a little bit of my life. I think that it's hard, but you have to be direct, and the truth hurts a lot, but sometimes the truth also wakes you up. And I think that if you can get to a place where you don't feel this person will run away from you or cut you off, I think looking at someone and telling them the reality of their situation or pointing things out that the abuser does is important, because victims spend so much time creating a narrative in their head about their situation. Oh, he's not really like that. He's just like that when he's mad. And that was just a bad day. So you spend so much time creating a story about what is happening to you, that as a friend or as a loved one, if you're sitting there going along with it or not approaching it in a more direct way, you're facilitating or enabling that story. And now you're becoming a part of it. So I think the best way, if you can do it, is to just have an honest conversation with them, or tell them what you're seeing, because like I said, the truth hurts, but sometimes the truth wakes you up, and that's what you want to do with any victim of domestic violence.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Joyce. Joyce, let's the question that also is coming up is, it's happening right now. Police get called, he gets arrested, he's in jail. We know that the victim has been strangled, she's uncooperative. What's your best advice to a victim who's been strangled about her danger as we wrap up? I think Joyce might be unmuting herself.
Yes, I would explain to them just how dangerous being strangled is, to share my knowledge with them, because nobody ever did that for me, and it just might be a really eye-opener to them, that the importance of seeking medical attention. And I just wanted to add, though, give them love and hope until they can themselves love themselves and find their own hope. Support them, validate them, just don't support the violence. But I'd really try to encourage them to seek medical attention and give them some literature on strangulation.
Perfect. And Sarah, I think it's only appropriate to have the last final words before we wrap up from survivors. So Sarah, what's your advice to other victims or advocates when they're working with a victim who's been strangled?
Patience and listening. So often we don't get to tell our stories, and it's really difficult to kind of begin to be able to do that. So holding that space to let them know that they can share, and they can share the truth. I think that that is so essential. And again, you know, being direct, the truth does hurt, but it's something that we need to hear, as well as solutions. Being told that we need to leave without having a solution as to how we can put that together, just that's hopeless. And so providing us with that hope is also providing us with a path for something different.
Fantastic. Well, I'm just looking at the list of questions. So this is what we're going to do. Thank you everyone for turning in those questions. They're really good. We're going to answer them, and then we will send you an email with those answers, because we have more questions for Dr. Smock, more questions about resources. And I think everything I was hoping that would happen as a result of this webinar is happening. So what I want to do as we wrap up is give a special thank you to Michelle, Joyce, and Sarah for joining us today, sharing their stories. And quite frankly, I feel like my hope scores just went up, because I think the theme has always been through this webinar about giving victims their voices back, listening to them, giving them hope, and finding justice. So a couple of things: if you're listening in, you're thinking about the voices and that network that we're trying to create across the United States, especially connected to every family justice center. And if you're a family justice center wanting to start one, take a look at this toolkit. It was created by survivors for survivors to try to make their voices stronger. I want to look at the next slide. And for those of you who may not have signed up in our mailing list, please text right now, Hope Giver, the word Hope Giver, to 22828 to get started. That way you can find out about more resources that we continue to develop and improve, and also upcoming webinars or trainings. Michael Burke is the man who says we've got to get this word out in October. It's the time to try to share as much information. So if any of you are listening today and you picked up one thing that you want to share with someone else, go ahead and put it on Facebook, go put it on Twitter, share it in any way that you possibly can. It really does make a difference. We did that at our 4-day course, and within 1 hour of something being posted about strangulation and domestic violence, a victim came forward based on what was shared on social media. So what we do on social media does matter. We can have some positive impacts. The other thing I wanted to share for those of you who are interested in a family justice center, you can visit our website at familyjusticecenter.org. We have 2 books, among others. One is Dream Big, which is why family justice centers are important. Dream Big, Start Small is about how you can take the steps to open up a family justice center and provide more services from one location, and ultimately provide more services to victims. As a former director of the San Diego Family Justice Center, I saw for the very first time more victims coming forward to seek help before calling the police. So it is another pathway to hope and justice. I want to share with you that we will be all getting together in San Diego in March for our annual International Family Justice Center Conference. If you have any interest at all, sign up now. Registration is open. We will sell out again. Last year we had 700 people. We are expecting that now. If anything, make your hotel reservation first before you register for the conference. And then a couple of new things that really are fitting for this particular topic is cheering for the children. We didn't spend much time on this webinar talking about the children who are exposed to it, but as Casey always says, victims of domestic violence, children who are exposed to it, our hope gets sucked out of us. And I think when it comes to strangulation in particular, it is easy for victims to lose hope, especially if professionals are not there. But it's also our job to talk about hope and Hope Rising. So take a look at both books. They are available on our website, or you can go to Amazon.com. I think Hope Rising is going to be one of the top sellers this year. And as we wrap up, I want to remind everybody we are saving this webinar. It's been recorded. It takes us a little while to pull it all together to then not only download it and then upload it into our resource library with all the materials that we discussed. We will be adding more based on some of the questions that we have received. And then last but not least, thank you, Michael, for putting this in about accountability to survivors. But I think the other big point is creating a community for survivors long after the crisis. And we had 3 women share what they went through, some life-threatening, near-death experiences. I'm sorry that they all had to go through that, but they all saw, and as you heard from them, something positive came out of it. They're all here today to be able to share their experience. They're all here today advocating for awareness and education, and they're all here today giving each one of us hope, and those who are listening and still need hope. The last slide is just to say thank you again for joining us. And please visit us on our website. We're really grateful to have this opportunity to speak with 3 amazing survivors and have Michael Burke and Dr. Smock on this call. And I want to thank our team that's at the headquarters for making all of this happen. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. We have one more day in October to celebrate and bring awareness to domestic violence. Thank you.